Hello there, and you're very welcome to the Arkham Avengers podcast. You join me, the host, along with Eamon, Hector, and Captain Fantastical Mick. Join us for some chat about football, crack, bold opinions, and a touch of chaos. From drama to questionable decisions, there's something here for everyone. So sit back, stay tuned, and enjoy the show. Well, okie dokie, and welcome back to another episode. We hope you're keeping well, and I suppose that some of our listeners will be or might be wondering about Damo. I have to say, if they have any sense at all, they'll have moved on from Damo and his antics as such there. That might be the case, Eamon, but I can report that Damo is out of the doghouse, and all seems to be calm in the household, although I'm led to believe he remains on a probationary status at the moment and hasn't fully regained control of the television remote control. So we'd like to wish him well during this difficult transition period. Firstly, can I say, and hello to all our listeners, it's nice to be back with you again here. I'd like to congratulate Damo on his remarkable recovery. We look back a week ago, his future looked less secure than a defender with a double game week. And now he's practically back in the polite society. I have been reading some of the emails and the correspondence that's come in there, and I see that he's allowed back on the main sofa again. Although there are reports that negotiations over snack privileges are ongoing, and sources state that he's taking things one day at a time and avoiding any discussion about talent shows. So look, frankly, I think if he can navigate this situation, then he'll cope with anything. And fair play to Damo, and also fair play to his family for being so understanding about this.
That's true, Eamon, I have to say, and I can also just say hello to all our listeners, and what a privilege it is for me to be back here on this fine episode and fine podcast and in the studio with you guys. I read some of the reports as well and the correspondence that came in, and I see that he was required to submit a detailed action plan before he got out of the doghouse there. So there's, a number of key milestones and performance indicators, and also I believe there's a commitment not to mention the Britain's Got Talent final for at least 6 months. To be fair, he's shown tremendous resilience, if you ask me. Lesser men would have folded under pressure, so they would have, but Damo is battled back and appears to have secured a phased return to normal life. So I think it's very good, so it is for him there. I believe he's now at the stage where he can almost choose one television show per week. Subject to approval, of course, that is.
Okay, well, I think we can leave Damo be until the next time. On today's show, we're going to be looking at one of the most important parts of any fantasy football season. That's the chip strategy. We'll be examining when our managers play their wildcards, bench boost, triple captain, and the free hit. The World Cup is also well underway. Scotland did make a strong start, and Germany have been handing out goals like they've gone out of fashion there. Eamon's favourite France got off to a winning way also, and Spain, Mick, they let you down. But can I also just say, as for Hector, he was in touch to say that he was going to cover the tournament for us, but we don't seem to have received any recorded messages or any audio from him here at the moment there. Well, he has been in touch, I can verify that. I did get a text message from him, unfortunately. Thought I could have blocked him, but he's still there. Ah, yes, Eamon, he has been texting all right there. My understanding was that he was going to send in a bit of audio, though, from Brazil to let us get a flavour and a feel, and that we were going to be able to include this on the show. Maybe a little bit of analysis from him talking to probably some fans in there. This is Hector that we're talking about. And Hector is probably looking for the record button to press. However, what he has texted has been fascinating, I have to say. He sent a message describing the atmosphere around Brazil for their match against Morocco in great detail. I mean, the only thing is he never actually mentioned the match, the score. All that came in was a lengthy discussion about grilled meat, a taxi driver called Roberto, an argument over whether a radio station was playing football commentary or local advertisements. That's what we got.
Eamon, I think that's a little bit harsh on Hector, especially when he's not here to defend himself there. He's definitely watched some of the football, at least That's what I've taken from the messages that he sent in there. Because, now, look, he sent in this text message here. He said, look, Brazil should have scored more.
Look, well, I don't know what he's talking about there.
Well, look, he sent that in, but unfortunately he sent this message about 3 hours before the match. He's operating on a different level altogether. Some might call it confusion, I'm not quite too sure, but I'd say Hector calls it instinct.
Well, I think with Damo fully rehabilitated and Hector providing world-class coverage of everything except the football, Eamon, Mick, are we ready to dissect the topic of chips?
Well, I'm ready. I've got all my notes there and I've done my homework.
Well, I'm ready. I'm always ready, you know that, host. Always ready. For the 2025-26 season, there was a new introduction in and around chips. The chips are, of course, the free hit, which allows a manager to make unlimited transfers to their team for one game week. And after that game week is over, the team reverts back to the team they had originally in place before that game week. So they don't lose any points there, but they don't get to keep any of the players in. The triple captain is what it says it is. So your captain is going to triple his points. The wildcard allows a manager to make unlimited transfers for a game week, which won't cost them any transfer points either. And they keep the players that they bring in going forward until they want to change them. And then we have the bench boost. And when activated, it means any points that players on the bench scored, that's going to be added to your game week total there. Previously, of course, the managers only had one wildcard, one triple captain, one free hit, and one bench boost for the entire season. But last year, managers were able to use their chips not once, but twice. Now, the only thing is that manager had to use the first chips by the 30th of December. So that means you had to use your triple captain and your bench boost, and you had to use your free hit and your wildcard before that date. If you didn't, you lose them there. And then the second load of chips came in and that was available after that period. And you could use them right up to the end of the season there. Eamon, do you want to talk to us about AFC Tulane and give us a feel for what their strategy was? This is not going to take very long, I have to say, because this manager played their free hit in game week 6. They still only scored 54 points. It's slightly ahead of the weekly average, which was 46, but it's certainly a long way off 124, which was the highest points. In game week 9, they decided to activate the triple captain. They opted for Erling Haaland, who played for Manchester City, and he scored them a whopping 6 points. Yes, you heard me right. 6 points. In his defence, you probably could say that Haaland had been showing form. He had 13 points in game week 8. He had 8 points in game week 7, 16 points in game week 6. So on a run of form like that, you think, okay, he's going to get me a good haul of points as a triple captain, but it's a pretty poor result there, I have to say. And then in game week 13, they opted for a bench boost, and that scored them a total of 2 points. I've reached the conclusion that AFC Tulane treated their chips a bit like Christmas presents. They got excited, they opened them up early, and then spent the rest of the season wishing they still had something left there. By game week 9, they burned 2 major chips and haven't really received any meaningful return. But the real head scratcher here for me comes in game week 13 with the bench boost activated, and that's 2 points, like 2 points. I've seen people spend longer deciding what flavour crisps to buy than this manager appears to have spent preparing for the bench boost. And the whole purpose of the chip is to maximise the 15 players that you have there. Instead, it looks like the bench contributed little more than a polite wave from the sidelines. Then comes the most remarkable statistic of all. There's no chips played in the second half of the season, and incredibly, the first wildcard was left completely unused. I don't know what happened. I don't know what's going on. It doesn't make any sense here to me. An unused wildcard is the fantasy football equivalent of finding out someone bought a parachute and decided not to wear it before jumping out of a plane.
That's it exactly, Eamon. I mean, the wildcard is supposed to be your emergency reset button. That's just madness.
And that's all they done. And the mind boggles what this manager was thinking about. I mean, I've nothing more to say on this, because if I start saying any more, I'm liable to get us put off air. Yeah, well, that's okay. So that's AFC Tulane season. That's it. I told you this wasn't going to take long. Short, sweet, and nothing. Can I say, it's not the chips that failed spectacularly here, I suppose. Look, it's that they never really delivered anything remarkable for them or memorable for them. And the wildcard in the chips for the second half of the season sat untouched. Something like an emergency glass nobody wanted to break there. And yes, it is a little bit perplexing. You get them. Why don't you use them there? Moving on anyway, Mick, you want to tell us a little bit about what Quinn's heroes did with their chips. So hopefully now there's a little bit more news on this.
Yeah, thanks, host. Yeah, well, we've got a little bit more traction with this guy here. So, although it's a little bit of a mixed bag, I have to say, with some excellent decisions in here, some average ones, and there's an outstanding finish in this. This manager played their first chip in game week 18. When they decided to triple captain Erling Haaland, and on paper nobody could argue with that. Unfortunately, football doesn't always read the script, and Haaland only returned them 6 points. Hindsight is wonderful, and at the time most managers would probably handed a captaincy to Haaland there, so I wouldn't criticise this decision, I have to say. Sometimes you go with the best player and you have to accept it didn't work out there.
Yeah, I agree there. Yeah, Mick, I would agree. I look, we can sometimes be guilty of judging a decision a manager makes and its outcome rather than thinking what was behind the decision, I have to say. So, yeah, if Haaland had scored a hat-trick that week, we'd be sitting here calling that a masterstroke.
Well, then we move on to game week 19 when they play their first free hit, and this didn't work out. They only scored 34 points, and the average game week score that was 40. So not a great return there. But then we fast forward to game week 36 when they played their second free hit and scored 74 points. The average that week was 65, so they've got a return on that chip there. And then we come to perhaps the best chip that they played. Game week 38, triple captain Bruno Fernandes, who scored them 42 points. 42 points for one player on the final game of the season. You know, the like of that can transform your season, so it can, especially your positioning in the table and that there.
Can I just interject there just for a moment, Gad?
Of course, Eamon. What are you thinking?
Well, there's one statistic here that jumps off the page to me. Quinn's heroes never played either of their wildcards or their bench boosts. Now, that's 4 major chips left unused. That's like turning up to a golf tournament and leaving half your clubs sitting in the car. The wildcards give a manager the opportunity to completely reshape their squad, while the bench boost can have it can be a huge point earner for them there. And if it's planned around a strong bench or a double game week, there's rewards to be picked up on that there. But Quinn's heroes, they never get themselves the chance to benefit from either of these here.
So that's the report card for Quinn's heroes. Interesting one that they never used either the wildcards or the bench boost. You can't help feeling that perhaps maybe there was another chapter to this story that was never written. It's time now to look at What a Beauty 99. So if you thought AFC Tulani and Quinn's heroes had left a few chips unused, you're going to enjoy this. A quick reminder that this manager finished in 9th place, and fantasy football managers have 2 sets of chips available across the season. So, Eamon, surely there must have been some interesting chip strategy going on here.
And I can tell you without any doubt there was no strategy here. And when I say there wasn't any strategy, I'm saying there was nothing here. I've checked the records. I checked them once and then I checked them again. I was starting to think perhaps maybe the website had crashed there. What a Beauty 99 didn't play one single chip all season. Not one. No triple captain. No free hit. Not a sign of a bench boost. Not even a sniff of a wild card here.
When Eamon was talking about this, I was looking as well, and I had to say, I assumed there was some sort of error. I thought perhaps the page hadn't loaded up properly, but no, it's all correct. This manager decided that the chips were like an ornament to them.
I don't know what he thought they were, but look, finishing in 9th position without using a chip does merit some sort of applause, if you want to give them that there. Yes, they picked a squad and they made 16 transfers there, but this is like entering the Tour de France on a bicycle with only one gear. Imagine what they could have been able to achieve if they had applied themselves, if they'd used even some of the chips that were available. They didn't have to use them all. If you don't want to use them all, that's okay, but surely you could use 1 or 2 of the chips. Like, this is mind-blowing stuff here.
Now, that's a really good point, though. This manager finished in 9th place. They didn't finish rock bottom, but
they effectively refused to use their chips, which could have been advantageous to them.
Well, it's almost admirable if you look at it in another way. There must have been moments during this season when other managers are activating their chips. Is that this manager sat there saying, "No thanks, I'll manage"?
Well, I'm fascinated, you say it's admirable, Mick, but I'm fascinated by the psychology of this. I mean, is it the case that they forgot to use the chips or forgot that they had chips? Were they saving them for next season? Did they think that there was some kind of rollover scheme here that I'm not using them here and sure I'll double the double next year or something like that? I mean, when game week 38 finishes, every single unused chip disappears. It's like buying 8 lottery tickets, sticking them safely in the drawer, and never bothering with them ever again. I'd love to know though, is this accidental or is it deliberate from them? Because if it was deliberate, then it has to be one of the boldest strategies we've had from any of the managers here. And if it was accidental, then it's one of the most expensive oversights. So what's the verdict on What a Beauty 99? The verdict for me is that they show signs of being a manager who can compete. But this season, they'll be forever remembered as the manager who completed an entire season without pressing a chip button there. And that's almost harder to do than win the league, to achieve that.
I would like to say that if there was an award for most patient fantasy manager of the season, I think we found a winner here. Look, the chip stayed in the packet, the wrapper was never opened, there's 8 perfectly good fantasy football chips, probably wondering what did they do wrong.
Well, hopefully maybe next season they might play a couple of those chips. I'm not going to hold my breath, I'd like to say that now, because that's just skylarking going on there with this manager, I think. Next up anyway is Blightsome Squad, and they finished in 8th place overall this season. Now, this is a manager whose chip strategy is almost a complete opposite of What a Beauty 99, because they weren't afraid to use their chips. In fact, they used almost all of them, and on the face of it, they timed many of them to work exceptionally well. Eamon, you've been taking a look at the numbers here now. Was this one of the better chip campaigns we've seen so far? I think it probably was, and when you look through the season, there's a lot to like there. The first major move comes in game week 16 with a free hit. They scored 74 points, while the weekly average was 60. That's a healthy 14 points gain over the field, and it's exactly what you're looking for there. You're looking to make the points here.
Straight away you're getting value for chip there, ain't you, Eamon? I mean, you don't need to have the highest score in the world. You got to consistently beat the average. That's a successful week for you in my books there.
Well, yes, that's right, yeah. Okay, so then, of course, the first wildcard comes in game week 18. Again, it's another positive week where they scored 50 points. The average was 44. So after 2 chips, Eamon, they've got 2 from 2. They have, yes. In game week 19, they went with a bench boost. This is one chip that really didn't deliver. They got 36 points. The game week average was 40 and the bench contributed 6 points. That's dismal. It's not good. It's not competitive there. However, things do improve in the second half of the season. The second wildcard was played in game week 27, and once again it paid off. They got 61 points compared to an average weekly of 45 points. Then in game week 32, they opted to activate the second bench boost, and their game week's total score there was 59 points, the average being 46. So again, we're on the rise here. The bench contributed 8 points. Now, it's not an enormous contribution, but it's certainly better than the 6 the lads were doing there. In other words, the second attempt at the bench boost is somewhat better. It was, yes. Then, what comes next is my favourite chip play. Game week 34, free hit. The manager scored 57 points. The average is 36. So that's a 21 point swing over the average there. This is exactly why managers keep a free hit in reserve for that awkward game week or the double game week there. It gives them a chance to attack a week when everyone else could be struggling.
Yeah, I like that style there, I have to say. I think they recognised an opportunity and decided to take full advantage there. And a move like that, I can see a manager rise up the league table very quickly.
And then, if I can just finish off here, we come to the final day of the season in game week 38. So all the matches are on there. This manager decided to captain Jared Bowen, but not only did they captain him, they decided to triple captain Bowen, and he got them 36 points. The team altogether scored 73 points compared to the game week average of 41. That's an outstanding finish to the competition in my books. It was a gem of a decision to go for a bow on there. Really, really good move, and it paid off big time. So looking at this overall, you'd have to say the Blythesome squad got more right than wrong with their chips. Yeah, that's right. And you knew there was going to be a but here. Despite all that excellent planning, they finished the season with one triple captain unused. They let that slip through their fingers there. I don't know why. Perhaps maybe the manager might get in contact with us and let us know where they're. But, maybe they were waiting for the perfect double game week, or maybe there was injuries that changed our plans, or maybe they just simply overlooked that they had this chip here. But when the season ends, as I said, unused chips have exactly the same value as Monopoly money here. They're gone, and that's it. It's finished. Adios. So, the verdict on Blythesome squad, we're saying a very impressive chip strategy overall, but when they look back on the season, there'll be one lingering question. What if that final triple captain chip had been played? Now, next on the list is Wurtz's behind me, who finished 7th this season. Looking at the league table alone, you'd think that this is an average season for them. However, when you dive into the chip strategy, something really stands out here. Now, Mick, what do you make of this manager's chip strategy?
Well, for me, I think this is one of the best chip strategies we've reviewed. If we were handing out marks for best chip management, Wurtz's behind me, would they be right up there with the rest of them? So they'd be top of the class, let's say. They were proactive, and almost every chip produced a return for them there. Now, things got underway in game week 1 with a bench boost. An interesting move, some people would say, because it's so early in the season, but they managed to get 18 points from the bench. The team scored 58 points altogether. That bet the weekly average of 54. Then comes game week 7 and they played a free hit. Another success. 70 points scored. Beats the average of 60.
Okay, so they're off and out of the blocks very quickly here and nearly started their season, so it is.
Very much so, yeah. They looked like they were committed. A lot like they were focused there. And I say that because game week 13, they decided to play their wildcard. They scored 40 points. The average was 35 there. Again, it's another result. Eamon, you might think 5 points is not much. 5 points could be the difference between first place, second place, third place, top 5 finish.
Oh yes, I understand. Yeah, 5 points. Every point counts. Yeah, if you're getting points, you're doing good. You're doing the right thing. Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that.
And here comes a standout moment for me. Game week 17, triple captain, Erling Haaland. And he delivered 48 points for them there. The team in total scored 98 points compared to the weekly average of 66. I think that's a magnificent use of a triple captain there.
That is what I'm talking about there. That's exactly the sort of week a fantasy football manager dreams about. Get the triple captain guy right. A load of points coming in. Other players contributing as well there. As Mick says, the team in total scored 98 points. Haaland got 48. They've all contributed 50 points. And in a lot of the game weeks, like the average is 40, 45. So the team are doing it as well as the triple captain. And that's the key point there.
Absolutely, Eamon, absolutely. I couldn't have put it better myself there. So, when your triple captain gives you 48 points, you simply put a smile on and watch the green arrows all the way there. When we take a look at the second half of the season, it's a continuation of the first half. In game week 31, they played a free hit. They got 65 points against a weekly average of 38. And they followed that up then in game week 33, where they made another bold move with a triple captain this time. This time, they moved away from any of the obvious names that would be on your list there. They went and backed Junior Groupie from Bournemouth. A lot of you might be saying, well, who is he? He scored him 30 points. And the team in total, wait for this, they scored 104 points. The average was 66. That's another excellent decision there.
Well, that's 2 successful triple captains. There wouldn't be too many managers now that would be saying that they have that.
No, there wouldn't be. And I'll tell you, the second wildcard arrived in game week 34, 44 points against an average of 36. And finally, in game week 35, the bench boost. And the bench boost contributed 13 points. The team scored 60 points, which bet the average of 50 that week there. Let's take stock here, lads. Every chip was played, every chip returned the value, and almost every chip bet the game week average. So frankly, lads, very impressive body of work, if I have to say.
This is what puzzles me now. I don't have no buts here now, but when you talk about the success of those chips, you would be expecting that you'd be talking about somebody making a challenge for the title. Instead, they finished in 7th place. Lads, the obvious question here, of course, then, is if the chip strategy was so good, as Mick and Eamon, you were in agreement with it there, why wouldn't they higher up the table? I think myself here that you look at chips, and the chips, they enhance your season, but they may not necessarily rescue a season for you. Like, if your transfers are inconsistent, or if your captaincy choice is outside of the triple captains, if they're not landing there, then the perfect chip strategy will only recover so much ground for you there. And we've also got to just think, like, we're talking about a total of 8 chips. So that's 8 game weeks. There's only 38 game weeks altogether. So you have another 30 game weeks there where you're no chips. You've got to rely on your own strategy, your own analysis, your own gumption to get the right result when you don't have the chip in play.
I think Eamon's got it right there. Yeah, you've got to be able to have a consistent run week in, week out without having the chips there in order to be challenging for the position there. You know, it's a bit like having the fastest pit crew in Formula 1. They give you the perfect tyre change every single time, but if the driver keeps missing the apex on every corner, you're never going to win the Grand Prix there, you know.
I'd actually say, if I can add there, what is behind me might be one of the best examples we've seen today of excellent chip management not translating into an elite finish. That's not a negative on their behalf. They got that chip strategy fine. Now, they need to look at the other stuff and see what's going on there.
Well, I think that's a pretty fair assessment, I think.
Now, we're going to take a look at our final manager today, and that's Silverstroke. And Eamon, you're going to give us a little rundown on how this manager worked with their chips. Okay, Silverstroke finished in 6th place, and looking at their chip strategy, there's a lot to be admired, I have to say. Every chip was used, some huge scores were achieved, and yet there were 1 or 2 moments that might leave this manager scratching their head. My first impression is that this manager was quite aggressive, especially when it came to using their chips. They weren't hanging around. They backed themselves, and more than often, they got a reward, which is to be commended. So it all kicks off in game week 10 with the first wildcard, and immediately the team responds with 87 points, while the average is 65. And then game week 16, we have a triple captain, as played with Erling Haaland. They decided to go with him, and he delivered 39 points for them. So we'll take that. The team finished altogether with 81 points. It's compared against a game week average of 60. So again, you've got a positive there. However, there's a little bit of a wobble then in game week 18. They went with a free hit. They scored 43 points when the average is 44. Now, it's not the end of the world, but it was a little wobble there. You'd like to see them get those 3 hits, all bringing in the result.
That's easy, for us to look at it like that Eamon post. Sometimes the players you bring in, they simply don't perform, and that can be frustrating, but it does happen in that there.
So I guess you really could say that chip didn't really justify itself then. No, it didn't justify itself. However, thankfully, Silverstroke responded brilliantly. Game week 19 had a bench boost and the team scored 73 points. The average that week was 40 points and the bench contributed 13 points there. So 13 points on your bench means everybody is contributing, and that's proper planning. As you say there, they bounced back pretty much immediately from that little wobble. They did, yes, and that's good, because sometimes a wobble can put you off. It could take maybe a couple of weeks to get you back in the swing, but you bounce back so quick like that, and so positively, and a good result. It really lifts you, so it does. Things don't stop there. Let's not just sit on our laurels and think that was it. Game week 31 saw them play their free hit, and the team scored 71 points compared to an average of 38. And then comes another superb wildcard in game week 34, a total of 65 points while the average is 36. Then comes the second triple captain. Again, it's Erling Haaland. Again, it's a success. 33 points is what he scored for them. The team scored a total of 87 compared to an average of 65 points here. At this stage, I'm thinking Silverstroke has absolutely nailed this chip strategy for game week 36. Finally, we reach game week 38. And this, listeners, is one for the fantasy football archives, the bench boost. Final day of the season, the team scores a total of 64 points. They're comfortably above the average of 41. So far, so good. The bench boost contributes nothing. 0. No point. Not even an accidental assist from the substitute goalkeeper. I've seen more productive benches at a bus stop. So that just was flattening.
I almost feel sorry for that manager. You spent all season waiting, play that final bench boost, and your four substitutes, they collectively decided it's a perfect afternoon to put their feet up and do nothing.
Well, I'm not quite sure if it's one for the archives, Eamon, but what's your verdict here overall of their strategy? I think it was excellent. 2 superb wildcards, 2 successful triple captains, 1 outstanding free hit, and a really good first bench boost. The 0 bench boost, it was almost enough to spoil the story, but it doesn't quite do it. Yeah, it takes a little bit of a shine off things there. But overall, look, over the season, I think the manager extracted tremendous value from their chips, and if anything, it prevented them from finishing higher than 6th. It certainly wasn't their chip strategy anyway. That's, I'd be happy with that. A manager would have to be pleased with it.
I agree with Eamon on that. You'd have to be really happy. Silverstroke, they're right up there with the best of them when it comes to the chip strategy. Excellent. Top draw, lads, top draw.
And I think that's a perfect way to end this week's review. We've seen managers who forgot their chips, managers who didn't use all of their chips, and managers who made inspired decisions. On our next show, we'll continue to work our way through the top managers to see whose transfers won them glory and whose transfers left them wondering what might have been. And before we head off, we might just spend a couple of minutes just on the World Cup because we start to come to life. We've had goals, surprises, and there's a couple of teams already putting down their marker. Eamon, I'll come to you first here. Who's caught your eye? I have to say that I'm well impressed with Germany. They look organised, clinical, and they've got goals all over the pitch there. When you put 7 past one team and follow it up with another solid victory, you're sending a message to the rest of the tournament there. I also like the look of Netherlands. They seem to have that balance between attacking flair and defensive discipline there. And yes, before anyone says anything, I'm still keeping an eye on Scotland. They got up to the perfect start by beating Haiti. And yes, the defeat to Morocco was disappointing, but all is not lost. They can produce possibly something special against Brazil. Stranger things have happened in football, so it has. I'd say that's a very optimistic view, Eamon. I think Scotland might need a little bit more than optimism against Brazil.
Well, they'll need 3 goalkeepers, I think, there.
If Scotland beat Brazil, I'll happily open our next episode with Flower of Scotland. And with that, I'm just after seeing our listenership figures disappear, so thanks for that, Eamon. Mick, what about yourself there?
Before we get into the football here, I think I would like Hector to join us from Brazil, but mind you, when you go back to some of the text messages, he's probably going to be singing Copacabana and having a barbecue in one end and a coconut in the other there. After their football, I've really enjoyed watching Canada. I mean, England beating Croatia, that's going to have supporters booking their flats to the final without anything there.
Okay. We also have to mention Mayo were playing Meath. This is the Gaelic football, so it is the All-Ireland Senior Championship. And that match took place on the Saturday, and I think it just about had everything there. A real game of 2 halves there, with the momentum swinging all over the place, and somehow Mayo found another gear to book their place in the All-Ireland quarterfinals after a remarkable comeback. Mick, I'd say you enjoyed that match there.
I certainly did. Oh my gosh. Mayo looked in all sorts of trouble in the first half. Meath were excellent. And I had them on the ropes there, but whatever was said in that Mayo dressing room at half time, it worked. The second half comeback was outstanding. They showed tremendous character. Other teams would have just rolled over. They just wouldn't have had the ability to try and come back, at another team that were really going at them also.
Yeah, Mayo will always entertain you with that. And can we spare a thought for Martin Carney? I heard him commentating on Midwest Radio, and I don't actually think I've ever heard somebody so excited there. You'd think somebody told him that there was free tea and sandwiches in the commentary box. As Mayo were coming back or storming back, if you wanted to say that, you could almost hear his blood pressure rising with every score. And I say, by the final whistle, I reckon he was fit to lie down and have a strong cup of tea there. Look, it's what makes local radio brilliant. You hear exactly what means to people there. I say he nearly was ready to hop out of the commentary box, pull on the football boots again, and show some of these lads, how they get stuck in there. And of course, we also had action with Monaghan, who were taking on Westmeath there, and they had a nice win there, so they're also through. And Donegal, unfortunately, just fell short of Dublin. But of course, Monaghan are taking on Louth, and Cork are going to be taking on Mayo. So an interesting markup there. Hopefully both of these teams might get through there. You never know. But shall we look? We can talk about that a little bit more in our next show there, because the football will still be continuing there. One miracle at a time now, host. I mean, I settled for Mayo reaching another All-Ireland semi-final and Scotland somehow finding a way past Brazil. I'll admit one of them seems slightly more realistic than the other. Okay. Well, that's it. So for Mayo and the teams and the football, and for Damo, as I said, we might have audio from Hector. We'll just have to wait and see here. Although I'd be more confident that he's probably reviewing Brazilian restaurants at this stage here. Maybe he's in the restaurants trying to watch the football, but there's a breakdown someplace there. Yeah, well, look, I said this before. This is Hector. His last message to us here didn't even reference football. There wasn't a mention about the World Cup. Just recommendations about steakhouses, a beach cafe, and he mentioned about looking at sightseers on a bus, as he did.
I'm actually starting to think that Hector's not covering the World Cup at all, lads. I think the World Cup is just happening there while he's over on holidays in Brazil. I'm not holding up much hope about this piece of audio coming in.
Well, look, we'll be in touch with him again. We'll see what we can do and put it to him. Tell him the listeners are looking for it. Okay, we leave it at that. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, listeners, and don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review if you wish, and tell your friends about us there. Eamon, Mick, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, it's always a pleasure, and I look forward to coming back on the next episode there and see how the rest of the managers get on there, and who knows what else we could be talking about.
I'd have to say there's a little bit of momentum coming here between us. I think there's the camaraderie here is solid. Host, you always manage to keep the show going, and Mick, you and I, there's been a little sort of cooling there. We're getting on with the analysis. It was nice to hear you agreeing with a lot of what I was saying today, and that's very positive. Thank you. It's nice that it is. And look, as for the other fella, less said the better. Okay. Well, so for myself, Eamon, Captain Fantastical Mick, thank you once again for listening. Until the next time, take care of yourself, have a good day, stay safe. Wherever you are in the world, we'll be talking to you soon. Slán.